Yeah, my name is Shia Hassan. I'm a scientist at Harvard. Thanks a lot for your talk. You actually said in your talk that what feeds sectarianism is when the state becomes, there is a dissent against state, or politics becomes irrelevant. But I come from a politically fragile area. Some people call it Indian-occupied Kashmir, Indian-administered Kashmir. I call it Kashmir. For me, it's still a country. And, the thing is that it has actually seen both the things. The state is definitely, there's a lot of dissent against the state. More than 100,000 people have been killed in the last 30 years. There have been thousands of children who have been actually blinded by pellets. There have been people who have been actually put in the unmarked graves. And there has also been a political irrelevancy there when the prime minister of a country gets changed into chief minister of a country. So my question is, when you look at the armed groups there, most of them are actually Sunni Muslims. And now, with the advent of the time and like the new geopolitical thought, there has been also Ansar Ghazwat al-Hind, which is mainly, Saudi kind of like that mentality. But in all this chaos, we have never seen any confrontation between Shias and Sunnis. It was tried in the recent past, as recent as 2016, when there was an attack on a Shia village, but it never actually dropped up. What is the reason from your experience?
It's a good question. I can't pretend to know the answer of being an expert in Kashmir, but I will say this. Just go back to Hannah's question earlier as well. You look at the attack that took place on February 14th, that killed 40 paramilitary, that led to this recent crisis. I think the kid who did that was 20, 21? So how does he justify killing 40 people in a suicide attack? There has to be some Islamic justification. But is that why he did it? Why would a kid, what makes young people go and blow themselves up? It's a fundamental question we've been asking since 9/11 and before. In fact, Iran-Iraq war when this first started. So for me, that's the interesting question. For me, I see that and I think, okay, and it's interesting, the Indian government now, under this kind of hardline Hindu nationalist movement, is now borrowing the same language of Bush and Netanyahu. We know about Israeli-Indian diplomatic ties. Modi went to Israel, that's Indian Prime Minister. We know that they're all using the same rhetoric. We're all on this front line against the Muslim barbarians, the hordes. And we are on the front line against Islamic terrorism, whether it's in India, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in the United States of America. It's the same language. And I think it's the same problem. Everywhere that this is tried, it exacerbates the problem. And this has been going on since, what, late 1980s. Again, why now? Kashmir's been a problem since partition, right? But there wasn't this kind of terrorism in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. Right? So again, it was a unique mixture of geopolitics. The Afghan war was going on in the late 80s. The ideology and weapons was there, the Saudi influence there, but also the repression of the Indian state from the 1990s onwards. You now have what? 1 Indian soldier per 8 Kashmiris or something? The most densely militarized zone on the planet. Right? So in a place like that, for me, it's so laughable when I hear Hindu nationalists say this is about Islam or Al-Qaeda or terrorism, whatever. And what's interesting is if you talk about self-fulfilling prophecies, I talked about Yemen. Do you know that Manmohan Singh, who was the Prime Minister before Modi, he used to have a line in his speech where he used to say, every time he went abroad, he would say, we have one of the biggest Muslim populations in the world, second or third, depending on how you count, third biggest Muslim population on the planet after Indonesia, Pakistan, and we don't have a single Muslim, Indian Muslim, who joined Al-Qaeda. That used to be his line. He used to go give that speech here. Look at us, we're great, we've integrated that. We are the model Muslim country, our Muslim minority is wonderful. Which of course is BS. There's huge issues with Muslim minorities. Not as bad under Manmohan Singh as under Modi, but there's always been problems. Interestingly, over time, they had to start amending the speech. The Indian government speech had to start taking it out and go, there's only one guy who's joined Al-Qaeda. There's only 2. Now again, I asked the question, if it's about Islam, then how do you explain the evolution? This is about changing circumstances. And again, in Kashmir is a classic example now, where you see the mass blinding, which got very little coverage in the West. The Guardian did a very good long essay on it. But most media outlets, especially the US, don't give a damn. India is an ally. So you look at that and then you say, are you surprised at the level of violence in response? I mean, this is basic stuff. This comes back to what I was saying after 9/11, which is foreign policy. There's clear points where you can go, Palestine, Kashmir. Oh, surprise, young men want to take their lives and kill them. Why? What would make them want to do that? It's not rocket science. So it's interesting what you mentioned about the Sunni Shia. I didn't know about that, but it is an obvious point. And I would say probably because they have a common enemy. But here's what's interesting. I say this is a Shia. I know a lot of Indian Shias who have a soft spot for Modi, because, and again, I'm not generalizing it, that's not me general, I'm just talking anecdotally, the plural of anecdote is not data. But there are Indian Shias who do, and they're being wooed by Hindu far-right groups. Why? Because it's the same British colonial mentality, divide and rule. Right? How do you get the better of a Muslim population? Divide and rule. It's what the British Empire did, and it's now what these samurai groups. It's what I mentioned the Israelis. It's what Naftali Bennett Netanyahu do. Come over to us, Sunnis, so we can fight Iran. In India, it's the reverse. Some Hindu nationalists say, "Come over to us, so we can fight all those Wahhabis." It's a real problem, and that's why I talked about solidarity. The worst thing you can do is allow yourself to be divided and ruled by people who have no interest in your welfare or betterment.
Thanks.
Should we take some from the back?